my goodness, it's already the grand return of King the Hill. We are here with season 15, and if you've seen my video from last time, we're yet again going to be going episode to episode, giving you my thoughts. I think this time we're going to do more thoughts than go on play by play. And as well, at the very end, you're going to hear my total thoughts of the entire season. Without a further ado, let's get into it. Episode 1, Failure to Hard Launch. This was a fantastic way for them to make a return into another season. Definitely throughout this, you can tell that a lot of the voice actors that were given their roles have gotten much better. Along with that, they also keep the recipe of the double plot that we got a lot in the last season. Hanks is really a funny one. It's the whole mystery with this electric truck, which is actually just a really funny plot twist in the end. On the other end of things, we have both Bobby and Connie who officially launch their relationship, and eventually this news gets back to Shane, and Shane ends up retaliating against Bobby by firing Emilio. So it's interesting to watch how Bobby has to kind of navigate through things, and even him and Shane have to kind of work together in a sense, and they talk it out. And eventually, in the end, we get to see both Bobby and Connie make things fully official to everyone. I rate this episode a 9.3. I thought this was very good. Definitely an upgrade from last season, and I feel like this is a good start to the people that were hating on the last season as well. Episode 2, Care of the Dog. Okay, surprisingly, this one was quite emotional. That had me tearing up a little bit here and there. In this one, we get to see that Peggy wants to adopt this scrawny looking dog that's named Caesar Salad. Hank at first is very embarrassed about this dog and doesn't necessarily like it, but as it goes on, he begins to build up a relationship with it. I found it to be very sweet, and it was a true send off to Lady Bird. It was also like you could sense that trauma that Hank had after losing her and moving on. Now, for the other plot that it goes on is the fact that Connie is going home for her birthday and Bobby decided to tag along. The thing is, once Connie gets home, she gets to see her parents are still fighting, and that's not what she wants. Unfortunately, this all comes from the divorce in last season, and we get a bit of an update to see that Khan is now living with Bill. And it's a bit of an irony because if you always remember back, he would have Khan always making fun of Bill, and now they're living together. In a way, it almost seems like Bill is doing a bit better. He's one of those people that does better whenever he's caring for someone, and he sort of is taking care of Khan, and they kind of have something going with each other. Khan's not as depressed. However, he is still depressed because we get to see he is upset. He can't make Connie happy, which throughout this, he's trying to get help from Bobby, which is another funny thing because he doesn't like Bobby, but he has to accept him to get closer to his daughter. Definitely in this episode, Khan's voice actor deserves credit because he definitely killed it. We get to see in the car that both him and Bobby are together, and he just starts breaking down. It made me cry a little bit because I'm like, man, you could really feel the pain. Definitely a well deserved Khan episode. He's even the one to suck it up at the dinner table whenever Connie's having a birthday dinner, and it becomes a success. She was really happy. I rate this episode a 9.5. I really don't think they're going to be able to top this episode. It was really, really good. Episode 3, Searching for Bobby Fischer. Another father-son episode. Not necessarily a huge fan of it. However, it does pick things up right near the ending. For starters, we have Bobby who is invited out by Joseph to go to Mexico. Before his trip, he isn't prepared, which Hank lectures him on. We get to see him being forgetful and not thinking about things, which ironically happens the same thing with Joseph, and Bobby has to remind him, which makes him finally realize what Hank was trying to do. On the other end of things, Hank ends up getting scammed. Again, in a way that is related to technology, it ends up being a phone scam that uses an AI Bobby voice. After that incident, he becomes very upset with himself, and Hank has to take a class and even learn from Dale what to do. Yeah, Hank ends up going pretty crazy trying to hide his identity at all costs, and we get to see like a full circle moment where Bobby actually does a fake scam call to try and help his father out. So a really sweet ending here where Bobby begins to understand what his father was trying to teach him, and ends up helping his father from getting scammed ever again. Really, my biggest highlight comes from whenever Bobby was doing the fake Stallone phone call, and we get to hear Hank begin to talk about his own son, and he talks about how he's proud of what he does, and it just felt very touching. I rate this episode an 8.4. This one does seem a bit down from the last two episodes, especially. Unfortunately, I feel like some of these technology episodes don't do the best. As much as they relate to the modern day, I think they come away from what King of the Hill is. At the same time as that, I do feel like whenever it came to the ending part I was highlighting, it kind of saved it. Episode 4, Hank Encounters of the Nerd Kind. A way better father-son episode than the last one. For the first plot, we have both Peggy and Min who end up taking this poetry class to see if they can get published. Once they reveal their poems to the class, it ends up Peggy's is too light and Min's is too dark. What the pair do figure out is once they work together, that they are the perfect yin and yang. The pair ends up teaming up together and they find true success, and Min even finds what seems to be love. Unfortunately, since she found happiness, she just isn't any help any longer to Peggy, and that's where Peggy gets frustrated and ends up going to tell Khan, which interrupts what's going on with her happiness. Min eventually finds out what Peggy did, and Peggy ends up becoming a stronger writer. However, all Peggy does in the end, she gets published and she just tells men she's sorry. To be honest, this is one of the few times I feel really sorry for men, and Peggy is just so selfish. Now we get to the big father-son plot, and it's the fact that Bobby now has a food truck that he has rented for this sci-fi convention. However, he can't drive it too well, so Hank ends up tagging along. Once they get there, the business wasn't quite booming. Bobby has invested quite a lot of money into this truck, and he sends Hank off to go and try and get customers. Unfortunately, Hank really screws things up. He not only loses his pass, but he also gets rejected by everyone at this festival, and even Bobby ends up just sending him home. Reluctantly, we get to see as Hank actually gives this sci-fi stuff a chance after belittling them and kind of making fun of it. And he ends up actually very much enjoying it. It's really a fun resolve. He comes back to the convention after making this axe he saw in the sci-fi movie, and he gives it like as an offering, and this gives Bobby a bunch of business just to take pictures with this axe. This was an episode from the preview that I was really excited to see. I rate this episode a 9. I feel like it was really good. But I will say what happened to Min was pretty upsetting to me. I guess, however, she is $10 richer. Episode 5, The Best Little Marriage in Texas. A Hank and Peggy oriented episode that really focuses on relationships. Both Hank and Peggy decide to volunteer at the church. They are both given two wildly different jobs at a marriaging retreat, both fondly being led by Dale and Nancy. As it begins, we get to see that Peggy tries to insert herself and basically try to take over the class. That is until she calls up for Hank, and she figures out there's problems in her own relationship. They go from working this to actually being a part of the classes. The pair are very upset, especially Peggy, who begins to spout off about Nancy being a cheater, which unfortunately Reverend Karen Stroop ends up hearing this and demotes both Dale and Nancy. That's when Hank and Peggy are set to teach this class, and as they're doing their look into the information, they figure out they aren't fit, and maybe Dale and Nancy were much better than they thought. On top of that, both Dale and Nancy were heavily upset. This turns into an activity set up by Hank and Peggy where they try to show that no relationship is perfect, setting it up perfectly so both Dale and Nancy can actually save the day. In the end, Dale and Nancy both get reinstated to teach the class. As a nice touch to the ending, we get to see John Redcorn make a stop to go see Nancy, and Nancy surprisingly turns him away. Outside of the flaws that Nancy is absolutely cheated, you can kind of see that they do somewhat actually have a perfect relationship in their own way. For our other plot, Bobby ended up being the side one. We get to see as Bobby ends up getting selected to be on this cooking show. Unfortunately, whenever the cameras start rolling, they don't find him entertaining enough. Unfortunately, it seemed like they were about to give up on him, and they secretly begin to record him in this rage fit talking against them. This is when they get the idea of turning him into a villain. So Bobby ends up talking against all of his workers and treating them very badly. Seeing how they felt, he finally gave this up and told the studio, hey, I don't want to be on the show. And it starts getting revealed how young he was. And that's whenever they start secretly recording him again and being like, oh, I thought you're like 40 years old. And I'm like, wait, what? So now they want to make him into some youth prodigy because he owns his own restaurant. To be fair, I felt like this was a pretty bad side plot for Bobby. I feel like we've already done something like this in the first season with the whole TV thing. Either way, it wasn't necessarily bad, but I hope they don't try to do this again. I rate this episode an 8.8. I really thought this relationship stuff was very good. It feels like it's been quite a while since we've gotten a Hank and Peggy oriented episode, but I feel like the bigger stars of it was both Nancy and Dale. I feel like we haven't seen enough Nancy yet, and she really felt like a highlight in a way in this episode. Episode 6, Chut 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 Changes. I found this to be quite a heartwarming episode, another one that is centric to both Hank and Peggy, heavily focused on changes. It starts off with Hank and Peggy golfing, and we get to see as Peggy gets a hole-in-one. After that, her golfing skills begin to decrease, and she easily fits into rage. This is where Hank slowly begins to notice her changes. He finally figures out that it is menopause, and what he does is actually quite sweet. He ends up trying to find a book and even trying to accommodate Peggy in any way. But as Peggy would read this book and as she would go through things, it would get worse and worse. Till eventually both Hank and Peggy go to this golfing tournament and Peggy ends up getting hurt. That's what causes Peggy to end up giving up, and Hank still tries to find a way to help his wife. He ends up talking to both Min and Nancy, and he finds a solution. He goes to New Mexico to actually get medical THC, which can actually help with her menopause. This episode really shows that Hank is the best husband. Not only that, but it's a funny moment whenever we get to see Peggy, Nancy, and Min gather in the alley. The other plot really came to a surprise because I feel like it's been forever since we got anything centered around Bill. It starts off with Bill wearing this weird wig that actually was given to him by Con. That's when both Dale and Boo Howard noticed this weird behavior between Con and Bill. It was almost like Con was treating Bill as a pet dog. And so we get to see as Dale ends up doing research and eventually leads Bill into his basement to reveal that Con was secretly meeting with lawyers, which Dale concludes that he was trying to make Bill look like he was incompetent to take his house. So Bill ends up trying to confront Con about this, and he figures out that what was actually happening was that Con was signing over his house to Min, as well as he was about to move out to his own studio apartment. This part is quite heartwarming. Through this whole time, everything that we get to see that Con was doing was trying to help out Bill. And the fact is, he finally thought that he was ready to be on his own. Not only that, but he was trying to boost his confidence. So we get to see as Con begins to move into his new apartment, and he sees a plant there that was given by Bill, which calls him the best roommate ever. So Con ends up coming back home. I rate this episode a 9.2, just two very fantastic plots. Episode 7, Hank Ruffles Some Feathers. This episode is a father-son bonding episode for both Boone Howard and Luke Jr. It all starts off with Hank noticing he doesn't have eggs, and it is revealed that Dale has been stealing them. So Hank tells Dale to go get some more eggs. Dale comes back and he brings 10 chickens instead of just eggs. They end up building a coop and raising these chickens. As they are done building it, this is where we get to see Boone Howard and Luke Jr. coming home after doing everything that they could. That's where Hank kind of gives the idea of, hey, maybe he can come and help out with the chickens. And so we get to see him get attached to a certain hen, which he ends up naming Bertrude. The father-son do actually find an activity that they can bond over, and Luke Jr. is even able to meet friends, which he joins the Future Farmers of America club. Luke Jr. ends up inviting the same club over to go and meet his chickens, and whenever they do, they get to discover that Bertrude is now a rooster. And apparently there's supposed to be like this rooster contest. Luke gets into a fight. His dad has to go to school to actually talk to the principal, and he gets into a bit of trouble and he was supposed to go home to his mother. When Mom goes to pick him up, he is nowhere to be found, as well as Boone Howard. They ended up both going to this rooster contest, and Hank drives him and the mother up, and this is where we get to see Boone Howard backing up his son. It's like this whole thing against the gender at once being a hen. Even though Luke Jr. doesn't win this contest, it seems that his mother kind of relieves him and tells him, hey, you know, it's okay sometimes if you don't follow the rules on the list, just don't let me know. So it was quite wholesome. There was also this gender message within all this. Definitely feel like the uniqueness comes from the use of the chickens to kind of send that message. Our other plot is another Bobby and Connie B plot. She ends up taking a job, which ends up being a mascot, which she just sucks at. Bobby ends up doing the job for her, and as he's doing it, she isn't paying attention to him at all. And from talking to Joseph about the time he was a football player and he would have the nerds do his homework, he figured out that he was being used by Connie. Connie and Bobby end up having a fight, and this is where Bobby finally realizes that Connie was just afraid to fail. So it ends up with him trying to support her as she fails miserably, which was quite funny. I rate this episode a 7.8. Felt like a bit of a letdown, especially the A plots. I thought it was good, but it didn't feel good enough. The same thing with the B plots. I just thought it wasn't good enough to even be a B plot at that. Episode 8, No Cuddle Offense. Once again, it is Bill's anniversary of his divorce with Lenore. Like always, the guys try to find a way to distract him, but it turns out that Bill isn't in bad spirits and he would rather go to his cuddle session. As the guys begin to do research, they figure out that this is a scam and Bill is addicted. Even at one point, Bill ends up selling everything in his house just to make enough money to be able to keep this cuddle service going. In a funny style, we get to see Hank actually get his own cuddle session. He goes there so the guys can jump Bill to save him. Another really nice resolution here we get to see as they cleaned up Bill's car and got it working really good so that way he can go get actual dates. On top of that, we once again get to see the guys playing football, which makes me kind of teary. I'm like, man, the nostalgia with that. Our other plot is Bobby is having a food reviewer at his restaurant and he's trying to make a good impression, but Peggy and her friends come crashing in. Peggy tries to get attention of this food reviewer and he finally does get to notice her, and that's when we get to discover this is one of her old students and he drops the review due to conflict interest. Bobby gets really upset with Peggy and what she does is go and pay the food reviewer a visit. That's where we find out the reasoning for him dropping this review was because Peggy actually failed his paper. Peggy ends up going into her whole thing about how she gave it a fair grade, and then we get to hear some sarcasm from the food reviewer that's like, yeah, I'll do the same thing. And yeah, she finally gets to see the results of that, and it's a terrible review. Bobby ends up losing a ton of business. Peggy feels really bad, and she goes to the food reviewer with the same paper that he actually turned in to regrade it. This is where we see her give him a second chance. Yes, it was a terrible paper, but instead of an F, he got a D. And she goes on to say, hey, your writing now, it's really good, but the only thing missing is honesty. And so the food reviewer goes back to Bobby's restaurant to give it a good, honest review. I rate this episode an 8.9, very much enjoying the nostalgia of the Bill stuff. And really one of the big things is I always love the Bobby and Peggy oriented episodes. I feel like those are some of my favorites in the entire series. And even now, this is another instance. On top of that, I really like the scenario of the restaurant critic. It feels very realistic. Episode 9, Reality Bites. Starting off with our side plot, the guys are going off on a fishing trip. Everyone is geared up normally except Dale, who brings a magnet to try and magnet fish. The guys finally get to the spot, and this fishing trip is a huge failure. That's until Dale ends up catching a cannon in the water with his magnet. The guys end up taking it back home and cleaning it up, and this is where they begin to have a disagreement on what to do with it. Hank wants to donate it to the museum, but the guys want to try firing it. Without the group making a decision, the guys decide to sneak it out and fire it up. This cannonball shoots very far away and they have no idea where it lands. They take it back to Hank's garage, and Hank finds out. Hank ends up making them go see where this cannonball actually landed, and they figured out it actually hit Big Tex's hand. More specific, the fingers. Hank ends up repairing the statue, and he almost comes close to falling off. However, Dale comes to the rescue by using his magnet to gently let him down. It takes us to quite the ending for them. They end up taking the cannon back where they found it and throwing it in, but not only that, but they engraved something into it. Battle of the Flipping Bird, Wingo. As they dumped it into the water, it's a funny dedication to whenever Big Tex was flipping everyone off, having no other fingers but his middle finger. Next is our main plot. So Bobby is gonna be on this big cooking show, King of the Grill. He invites out Connie to come with him. It's going to be like a setup for whenever they're going to be living together. We get to the part where Bobby is finally on set and the show begins. He is teamed up with another chef that went to a French culinary school that looks down on him. She ends up failing pretty miserably trying to finish the first part, and Bobby has to improvise to perfection. The chef finds out that she was wrong and gives Bobby credit, And the directors like this, they want things to be spiced up a bit more. So this other chef gets quite touchy with Bobby and it gets Connie jealous. Bobby reassures her this is just acting and she understands. Unfortunately, the same chef ends up kissing Bobby and Connie sees this, which ends up making her leave. And Bobby does something pretty crazy. It comes to a portion of the cooking show where we get to see him make a big reveal. It was going to be a love type of confession to the other chef, but instead, he reveals that he loves Connie, also sporting a t-shirt with the both of them, as well as reciting a poem from whenever he was younger. Both Connie and her roommate were watching this together whenever they hear a knock on the door, and it is Bobby bringing Connie flowers. And it ends on a very good note. Connie and Bobby are now going to be living together. I give this episode an 8.8. I was really disappointed in the guy's plot not being any better, especially whenever it had to do with big techs. I was thinking maybe something bigger to be done in the season, and this wasn't the case. But on the bright side, I really enjoy these Connie and Bobby episodes, especially when it comes to the time skip. It's been really fun and it's really nice watching them grow and seeing the relationship. Episode 10, Propane Recall. Talk about what a season finale. This absolutely contends as one of the best episodes of King of the Hill ever. We finally get to understand why Hank even left the country in the first place. It all starts whenever Joe Jack calls Hank to be his designated driver. Whenever Hank gets there, he discovers it's his other workmates from Strickland, and they reveal to him that Strickland is going down under and seek his help. Hank wants nothing to do with this. We get to see him actually escape and go around back, where everything replays what happened years back, which is also around the time that Bobby had the weird K-pop hair. We start where Strickland wanted to step down and he let Hank know that he's going to be promoting someone else to become the manager. Hank was very excited. He was thinking he was about to become the next manager of Strickland, but whenever it came to the day of the announcement, unfortunately, Strickland promoted his son. And we remember in the past what exactly his son has done, and that got Hank to quit on the spot. Hank ends up going jobless, and he's trying to find work. At the same time, Bobby finds his own job at 16, which is Whataburger. At first, Hank tries to apply for Thatterton, where we get to see our old-time pal Jimmy, who's always angry. Even though Strickland did him dirty, he couldn't do that against him. Hank comes home, and Peggy has good news. He got a job offer from a propane place in Houston, which ended up being the Saudi Arabia job that he took. Peggy and Hank end up going over the pros and cons, and they come out to think, hey, what about Bobby? He would have to move with us after all. So they end up going to Whataburger to talk to him. This is where they see him at the job, and he's doing very well, just like he's doing now as a chef. And the pair end up telling him about the job offer and how it's probably not going to work. This is where Bobby tells him, go ahead, I'll just be living with Luann and Lucky, and I finally found something I want to do. This first job really inspired Bobby on his whole culinary love. It's also a part of why Hank doesn't regret making his choice. We come back to present day, and Hank goes to talk to Strickland, and he wants him to fire his own son, which Hank is like, nah, I'm good. Hank really wasn't thinking about it too much. He felt good with what he did. That quickly changes whenever Hank and Peggy are driving to go meet Bobby at a restaurant. They drive past Strickland to see it in a horrible spot. Overall, in just very terrible condition. Then we get to see things much cleaner outside. We go inside, and those plates of the manager get changed into Hank Hill. Not only is Hank the manager, but we also get to learn he owns 51% of Strickland Propane, being one of the owners. I rate this episode a 9.8. This episode changes everything. This is definitely one of those King of the Hill moments we've all been waiting for. Sadly, I feel like this was supposed to be a part of a 20 episode season rather than a split of just 10 each, and I feel like that actually makes the last season look a lot worse than it should, unfortunately. This season is far superior to season 14. I thought the voice actors outdid themselves. They were able to finally get into the character's shoes. And I really feel like overall, they had a lot of fantastic episodes in this season compared to the last one. I really think there was only 2 episodes in this season I really didn't like. The lead going to that chicken episode, and there's just something about Luke Jr. and Boone Howard trying to do that father-son thing. It's just not the same as Bobby and Hank. At the end of the day, I really do love season 15, and I find it very enjoyable as someone that is a huge fan of King of the Hill. Even with the minor flaws, I feel like this has got to be one of the best seasons of King of the Hill ever. I rate King of the Hill Season 15 a 9.5. Definitely one of those seasons you gotta watch. It's got the finale we've been waiting for, and we are set to probably get another exciting season, where most likely Hank will be working again at Strickland. Not only that, but Bobby and Connie are finally going to be living together, Now, I also do have hope with the mention of both Luan and Lucky that maybe we could get a reintroduction to them, but sadly the VA for Luan has passed away. I'm not sure about the one that played Lucky, but I am hoping in some capacity we could have them on at some point. If not, there's always a chance that their daughter could be in at some point. I want to know what you guys' thoughts are on King of the Hill Season 15. Hope you guys stay safe. Until next time, peace out, guys. Wow, this is after the fact. I had no idea that Lucky was voiced by Tom Petty. Now that is something that is crazy. I wish I would have realized that sooner, but yeah, it just makes me think that these voice actors, they really are the heart of the show. Me, I always would watch this, I would be in love with the characters, but you never think about the VAs that really make the characters, and I really do feel bad. Another tragic case where the VA has passed away.